What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Another episode from the Florida Hockey Bros. We want to say before we start the show, Dariel, last week was our most watched video since we started doing this in the preseason. So we want to thank everyone that subscribed and that dropped the comment or liked the video. We'll try to keep it coming, keep it going for you guys. Provide you with some content that you can make fun of or support or whatever. So yeah, with that being said, today's episode, we're going to keep talking about the trade deadline, just our opinion on how everything has kind of developed the last few weeks. And we'll get into some playoff matchups as well. That might be really intriguing. Watching the Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes play last night was really fun, even though it was a low scoring game. So yeah, we'll get into that now. And I think the most logical place to start, Dariel, would be, are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to win the cup?
You're trolling. Just because they're on a heater now? Yeah.
It's Bobby McMahon going to be the MVP.
I mean, I think it's just all magnified because of the coverage that they have, right? Like they have so much coverage, not just from like general media, but from the Toronto market. And so everything is, I was thinking about that yesterday when I was watching the Panthers and the Hurricanes, which, that game was a tough game. It was like a playoff style game, physical game, good goaltending, actually quite, lots of chances, but not a lot of goals. So you could tell why these two teams are like teams that people respect and fear in the playoffs because of their style. They have the skill, the speed, the goaltending. I mean, I know in Carolina's case hasn't been great, but Kucherov was pretty strong yesterday. So anyway, I'm watching that game and I'm realizing how deep these teams are and how solid they are. And then thinking about how nobody talks about any other players on those teams. I mean, it's very rare compared to Toronto and other markets, right? Like, people know these players, but nobody really mentions nobody knows what kind of a year like Aho is having at this point, even though there's a bunch of other players that everybody talks about. And yet these are the teams that I would trust more. Like I would trust the Panthers or Carolina if they make a move or two to make a run to the cup more than the Leafs or some of the other teams. And so it's just funny how it just gets magnified. The Leafs are the Leafs, man. They play all out offense. They have top end skill. It's been healthy. They're sort of moved the lines around. They're going to, they're going to go for a while until it doesn't work, and then Keefe's going to blow everything up. It's going to go back to the old lines, go back to the old power play. It's the same old story. They don't have any consistency. They don't really build to an identity. They're just like try things, and when they work, they keep it. When it stops working for a game or two, they completely blow it up. Whereas Maurice, or the coaches like Carolina, Vegas, they don't panic even when they're going through a funk. They kind of, they'll make little tweaks, but you know where you're getting, and you know how you can build the identity. So I know that's not deadline talk, but since you're trolling, Toronto's.
No, I wasn't trolling, because if you guys go back to our prediction video, I said the Maple Leafs were going to get to the finals and win to the Stanley Cup finals. So I'm just making sure that all the new subscribers understand that when they do win. I think they've been playing well. I'm not going to crap on them. They've been playing really well. Austin Matthews has been playing really well. Marner as well. Nylander, all the guys. Everybody's kind of, it's a party,
Yeah, I mean, it is true, because it is true. I mean, they face weak competition, which doesn't matter because we've lost against bad competition before. To me, it's just the quality of play. They are playing better. Some of the guys are stepping up. There's a little bit more. Their new lines look a little bit more balanced. But I also say I've watched a lot of those games, and it's still mistakes are still there. It's just that they've played really bad competition. St. Louis didn't show up for some of the games. Vegas had not only injuries, but they didn't show up for the first couple of periods yesterday. And again, you play what you have in front of you, and good on them. But it's not like I watch other teams, even when they lose, that I'm impressed by or afraid of. Like the Bruins are still tough as shit. Like the way they play, it's just, you don't want to face that team, even if you're their favorite, because they're going to make you pay, and they're going to hurt you, and they're going to make you work for it. And they have really good goaltending. Carolina, the same. We outplayed them yesterday, even with Kachuk and Forsling out early, left the game early. But but still, like you could see that you guys could get hurt against the Hurricanes because they'll hit you, and so anyway, like that's the difference to me. It's like I don't fear the Leafs because the only way they can beat any team is just outscoring them. It's just getting hot. But the Bruins and Carolina, even if you beat them, you'll leave that series with a price that you've paid of some kind. So anyway, that's just to me the difference.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the deadline talk. Although I'll say one more thing. Yeah. For any team that faces the Leafs in the playoffs, just, try to shut down Matthews and Marner and just be physical those first two games, even if you lose them.
You hit that top line all you can. First two games, even their defense too, they're going to turn it over if you forecheck. So they're going to try to get fancy and try to get run and gun with them. Just hit them and make it tight. And once you get them frustrated, those defensemen are going to give you the puck because they're used to turning around, doing fancy moves, and getting the puck out and stuff with fancy passes. And those are the habits you have. So yeah, just hit them and you'll get the puck back.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. I guess we can start here. How about you give us, I know you've mentioned this to me before, so how about you give the people listening some of the teams that you think are going to be looking to make some additions and kind of what's out there. I know we didn't talk about Vetrano Henrique last episode. I know Duclair's name has been out there as well. Wheeler got injured. He's out for the season for the Rangers. The Golden Knights were already looking for some help, and now they're going to be out. Eichel is in long-term IR, I believe, and Mark Stone has a lacerated spleen.
Damn, I didn't even know that's what it was.
That's what it is.
That will take some time to heal.
Yeah, that's why there's no timeline for him, but I can guarantee you game one in the playoffs, he'll be there.
Oh, of course he will. No, I know that. He's a psycho. Yeah, no, he'll be there. But you don't want to get hit when you have that kind of.
If they're able to place him on long-term IR, I don't know. They'll have like 70 mil in cap space.
Yeah, they're like Tampa, bro. They're like always like Kucherov gets injured.
Dude, Kucherov. I'll say this about the Kucherov thing. That was impressive. To miss so many games and come back and just like nothing. That was impressive.
Oh, he's elite. He's one of the best. He's one of the best 5 players in the league. Like every year.
Dude, he's a crazy man.
He's elite. Man. Yeah, he's also a psycho.
All right, yeah. So, what teams do you think are going to be looking for some reinforcement? I know the Rangers they're going to need to, and I would expect the wild card teams to kind of make a push for it as well. So, what's on your mind?
Yeah, no, I think that there's parity in the league. I don't think they're like clear-cut favorites, to be honest. Obviously, you can always throw names around, but truth is there's a lot of teams that if they just make the right moves or they're healthy at the right time or a goalie gets hot, they could genuinely make a run. That's not everybody, but I think that's quite a few teams. Because of that, I do think that a lot of the teams are going to try to make at least 1 or 2 moves. And what I realize is that there's not a ton of high-end UFAs. I mean, there are some, but in general, you kind of have that mid-level UFA. Like there's a ton of those, and those are the ones that teams like to add to the deadline for the most part, especially at teams that are less cap space. So Bruins, Rangers, Panthers, Leafs on the East. We've already seen some moves on the West, but Edmonton's definitely going to add. Vegas definitely going to add. Colorado's definitely going to add. They're going to do some, right? So because there's an abundance of those players, I'm curious to see if by the deadline, the market all of a sudden gets flooded. The sellers right now either are playing it really tight because they want to increase the price, or some teams are not even announcing themselves as sellers. Like Penguins, we started to hear rumblings now, but the Kraken, Philly, now supposedly Philly's working on extensions with a couple of players. That might just be smoke and mirrors to try to get the price up on some of these guys. Who knows? But Philly's still in a playoff spot, so they don't necessarily have to sell. I suspect they'll sell a couple of guys and then keep the rest and figure it out in the offseason and kind of evaluate where they are. I think they have a good chance of the playoffs. I don't know that they're going to make a run or even win a series. I think they're too inconsistent for that, but, they're a tough team. So I think to me right now, what I'm seeing is, one, there's some teams that eventually are going to just give up and sell, and the teams that are like in the bubble for that are the Kraken, Philly to some extent, the Islanders to some extent, though they seem to be a lot more stubborn and they have a lot of long-term contracts, so it's a little bit harder to trade some of those guys, and they're older. And there was another team that I was thinking of that was in Nashville, which is kind of also in that bubble. St. Louis kind of in the bubble. You know, there's rumors about Buchnevich, I think is his name. How you pronounce the name? I think they're asking for like 2 first-round picks or whatever for him. So yeah, like those are the kinds of teams that you're looking at. And then you have the fire sale teams like the Sharks again, the Ducks again, which that's a whole separate conversation, man, that we need to have one day. But like, I don't see a method to the madness with some of these teams. Like the Sharks, you know, I could see why they would sell, but you know, it's like the Coyotes. Like you can keep accumulating picks, but unless you turn them into a plan and not just a bunch of picks, because look at the Ducks. They have a lot of young talent. They still stink. And I know you could say, oh, you could build it up. You could try to do it. But look what Jersey has done with the young talent, right? Buffalo was an example last year. Now they're falling off, but they were trying to build something there. Ottawa, again, last year, you know, was in the bubble and now has dropped off. But I still believe that Buffalo and Ottawa just need to make some tweaks and on defense and goaltending, and I think they can get better. And you've seen even Vancouver with some of the young talent, how they're just being able to turn a corner. So at some point, you have to expect that you have to compete. And some of these guys, either is the coaching and the system and the culture, that they're not training these guys up and they're not finding the right pieces and the right leadership. And they're kind of letting these kids kind of like play skill and that's it and do whatever they want. Or they just have no interest in winning. I mean, but that could be a thing. I mean, with the Panthers, we saw it for a long time, which is almost like a tax write-off. But I think for me, it's just curious to see this team selling year over year, but not quite turn it into like a plan. You know, get a player back, man. Get a veteran back. Get a good defenseman. Trade some of the young kids who have no leadership, and then try to build like a core, and then bring some of these like mid-level players to round out your team, and you might be an 8th seed, and then you can build on that. But I don't know. I don't believe in accumulating like a gazillion like first-round picks when like 10% of them are might hit. So yeah, it's just kind of curious how different teams run different things and the kinds of decisions they have to make. I do think that some of the teams have been stubborn just because they want to see if the prices go up. And it may be that because what the Panthers did last year, they might think, oh, if we just get in, we could do a run. But you have to be smart. The Panthers had a team that just the year before had been in first place and have been to the playoffs 2 or 3 years in a row. Like, it wasn't just the Panthers seemed to come out of nowhere, but they didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, we were having a bad season for the talent that we had and for what Maurice was trying to do. We just figured it out in the second half. But the Panthers should have been a lot better from the beginning of the season. Should have been a playoff team in the beginning of the season. So people forget that. This is not like the Phillies, the Flyers this year, which, are still a good team, but they're still kind of on the way up. So anyway, I'll be curious to see what Nashville does, what the Kraken do, what St. Louis does, what the Islanders do, what the Penguins do, not just right now, but in the offseason as well. And yeah, we could talk about some of the names and stuff that come up, but I think those are the teams that are, kind of looking to maybe sell, and then the ones at the top might buy a player or two because of the cap. I don't see any big, huge trades happening outside of maybe a big goalie being traded, and I guess Gensel will be the one forward.
Yeah. Speaking of Gensel, I wanted to talk about the Penguins because I think that's another team that has been kind of holding on or being stubborn, but for different reasons. I think based on what Dubas said the other day, he kind of maybe told the guys that they would get a chance to, compete this year, maybe next year, and it just hasn't happened. And if you watch them play, you can kind of see why it just doesn't happen for them. They're just not that great. But yeah, that's a team that's kind of interesting. And as far as like teams like New Jersey, word is they're still talking to Calgary about Markstrom. And then, Calgary's doing the stubborn thing with Tanev. They want to get the most that they can get, try to get a first-round pick. I agree with you about the picks. Arizona has a ton of picks, and, Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I think in the NHL it's easier to retool than to rebuild. If you're rebuilding, then what you're really doing is hoping to hit on a couple of prospects so that they can become the face of your franchise, and it usually happens. You know, Barkov, Huberdeau, Trocheck, Ekblad, those guys were drafted by the Panthers, 10 years ago, basically, and they kind of built on that and just kind of been adding pieces and moving pieces and retooling and different coaches. So I think it's just easier to do it that way once you get there. So for New Jersey, it makes sense to try to make some moves now. And Ottawa, Sabres, same thing. It makes sense for them to try to make some moves for the next few years. I just think those teams, like you mentioned, like the Ducks or the Sharks that are just rebuilding, and then you rebuild and then you trade away the pieces, it just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, let's talk about the Penguins for a little bit. Very interesting case. You look at the contract that Dubas signed, I think it was 7 years, which is, that's a long time to give a young GM that much power for so many years for such a, an iconic.
Well, he was hired as president.
And he made himself GM. Yeah.
Right. Which is, I know, whatever. I'm not, it's not me. Maybe he didn't have a lot of GM options because the season had already started. So I'm not trying to.
He made a couple of calls and was like, guys,
I'm the best guy for the job.
I'm going to have to step in here.
I mean, he wanted more money, more power in Toronto. He got to his head. He was a young GM. He thought he was the center of the universe. I mean, this whole thing about people are always picking guys off waivers just to mess with Dubas because he's not liked or whatever. I mean, whatever. It's silly shit. I think for him, he knew he had that job offer. He had it as leverage. He went back to Toronto and asked for more money and more power. They said no, and then by the time he said, "Okay, yes, I'll take the job," that relationship was already in disrepair, and I think he might have already known that. And he got a lot of power, money, and years. And maybe they saw some in him. I don't think of him as a great GM. I think he's as good as he's probably in the upper half of GMs in the league. He's made some really good moves. He got cooked on the contracts with Toronto, which I guess now Tree Living's getting cooked, so maybe it's not just him, is the market, but he made some good move and has some found some gems, and then also made some really terrible trades, like a lot of GMs. So anyway, I don't think of him as the way that I think of other GMs like in Tampa or Carolina or Cito, who I think generally speaking, I mean, some of them overpay, but they still compete year over year and actually have won or made deep runs. Penguins are in a tough spot. They were stubborn. I think it was ownership. I don't even think it was Dubas to try to bring him back this year with the old guys, and bringing Carlson in was a really bad move. I mean, it was a bad move the moment he made it, but whatever, the teams loved it because it was a 100-point player, and all of a sudden your power play is going to be great, and ironically the power play stinks. Just a bad read, just not the right player for that money. He could have gotten a lot more depth. In hindsight, it's easy to say. Now he's kind of stuck with that contract probably for a while because it's not easy to move. And he might have to sell at this point. He said it. They have to get younger, and that's true. They're slow. They're predictable. I don't think they can compete. I think their defense needs to be better. The defense is not that great. Ryan Graves, I think, is overpaid, and so.
Oh yeah,
that was a poor sign. I mean, I like Graves. I thought the Panthers could look at him, but not for that money, not for that length. I think the Mikkola move ended up being the smart move. So anyway, I think that's true of the Penguins, man, and I think it's true of some of these other teams that seem to be kind of waiting. And again, we'll see. But the Kraken had that thing last year. That was a flash in the pan, and I don't think people want to accept that. I even think the Devils. I mean, people are going to come at me for this. I don't think the Devils were as far advanced as they showed last year in terms of their run and how deep they got and how much the regular season everything clicked. They had a lot of depth. They had a lot of youth. People didn't see them coming. Good for them. The Rangers kind of froze after the first two games because the Rangers had dominated in the first two games, and I thought it was going to be a sweep, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then they woke up, and that was great for them. But one, it's going to be hard for them to keep all those guys together, obviously. And also, you look at their style of play. And it's just not a style of play that you recommend, man. They're very offensive. They turn it over a lot. They play flashy. They don't seem to have a strong of a system. And I think system and physicalities, everything. Yesterday, the Rangers like ran them over. Yeah. So anyway, I think some of these teams sometimes with the Kraken making that kind of a bit of a run out of nowhere, they kind of maybe bought into it and thought they could replicate it, but it is really hard. And you look at the roster, and it's a lot of the same guys, and so they do need to retool, and they need to sell some guys, I think, and figure it out. Maybe have 1 or 2 stars, or develop 1 or 2 stars, because they don't quite have that. And say with Nashville, I mean, O'Reilly's their first line center. Sorry, but I don't think you can win a cup with that guy as first line center. Toronto had him as a third line center.
I think Nashville. It makes sense for Nashville to kind of retool as well. I think they'll do that with Bruno.
Yeah, Columbus got to sell. I mean, Columbus is a mess. So.
Columbus they're just late to the party. They should have fired Jarmo when the whole Babcock thing happened, and you just gotta
before then, man.
Yeah, you gotta have a feel for things as your GM is making moves, and you see what's around you as well. Like if you're in the playoffs right now, or you want to be in the playoffs for years to come, you have to see what you're going against, and you kind of have to build your team for that. And that's something the Panthers did, and the Rangers have done a decent job. They're very physical. But yeah, all right. Let's look at some of the matchups for the playoffs and kind of give our opinion on what we think. Let's start with the West. Let's do a quick overview there. I hear so many people talk about the Stars. The only thing I think is lacking, from that team is just they're not physical. They don't seem to be that physical. They're very, very good on offense. They're very fast, very skilled, and obviously the goaltending has been excellent. But yeah, we have the Stars in first place in the Central. The Canucks are still in first place in the Pacific, even though they've slowed down a little bit. They're still plus 51 on goals. Ridiculous. We know about the Golden Knights and the Oilers, who have kind of, after that run, they kind of settled down a little bit. The Kings have picked it up a bit after firing the coach, and the St. Louis Blues. Yeah, I think the Blues are probably going to be the worst team in the playoffs in the entire league. But yeah, right now we would have basically the matchups that I will be looking at. If the playoffs started today, I would just focus on the Canucks against the Knights, and the Stars against the Avalanche, which I think the Stars win that series. The Avalanche have issues, and I also heard.
I don't know, man. Stars are on a 4-game losing streak, and they're going to bolster their defense, which is what they need to do. So that might help them a lot. Colorado might also make a move, but Colorado has the experience. I think just Colorado doesn't have a lot of depth. I don't think the Blues are a real playoff team. I'm sorry. It's just that team does not have
so bad
leadership. They're bad, and they just try to hit you on the counter. They have some skill, but there's just not a ton of leadership there. Not a team that you'd be scared of. The same with Nashville. The team I actually would love to see if they can come back and make a run is the Wild. They've been good lately. They have a little feistiness. They have some skill. They have some really nice young players. So that's a team and they've made the playoffs the last few years. So I don't know. I like the Wild more. I don't know that they can compete with anybody, but I think that they would be more interesting. Calgary's going to sell, so I don't think Calgary's going to make it. But anyway, just the West is kind of set for the top teams, similar to the East. So it is more about who ends up playing who and what moves they make, before the playoffs. And there's a lot of players that are mentioned. The Oilers, funny enough, want to add a top 6 player, which is hilarious to me because I totally get that you always want to bolster your top 6. I mean, what team wouldn't want to? We could use a top 6 player, right? We need one. But they're talking about adding Gensel. They're talking about Henrique. I think makes more sense to me. He's a little more versatile and can kill penalties and all that. I still think the issue with Edmonton is the goaltending and the defense. Their goals scored are fine. They've scored more goals than the Panthers in fewer games, as an example. But again, it's like I guess don't claim to understand what the approach is. If you don't think you have enough offense with some of the top end talent you have with Hyman, not just Draisaitl and McDavid, but Hyman, Kane, some of these other guys, I don't know what else you would want, right? And I guess you haven't developed a ton of young players in house, and Puljujärvi never worked out, which was the big high pick. But anyway, just curious about those kinds of things, right? Like, how do you evaluate what you actually need, and not get desperate and not mess it up? So yeah, I'll be curious to see what Edmonton does, what the Leafs do, because I think the Leafs are not going to end up getting Tanev unless the price goes down, and probably will go for another player or two. But I think that they're going to end up, if I can make a prediction, I would say that the Leafs likely trade their first pick, the first round pick, to bolster it because of the run they're on. They're going to feel the pressure to have to make another run, which is great because then they'll have no assets next year and the same cap issue with all the contracts going up, with Matthews and Nylander. So anyway, I think that's, to me, the curious thing, ramblings about Lightning getting Hanifin and going after Hanifin with Sergachev out. I think there were rumblings about the Panthers there, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Cito's going to rock the boat. I actually see Cito trying to replace Montour with Chychrun in the offseason. That makes more sense to me. But yeah, man, just, there are a lot of players out there, man. There's obviously guys like you mentioned, Vetrano. There's so many guys. I mean, you could rattle off the list. There are guys that I like, and that's a separate conversation for the Panthers. But yeah, man, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what teams evaluate as like the biggest need. The Rangers, too, the Rangers need to replace Wheeler, but are they going to do Henrique for a center? Are they going to do Boone Jenner? Are they going to? Yeah. Are they going to have Vetrano for some scoring? The Bruins could have Vetrano. They might need some top six scoring. They also need a center. So who knows?
Yeah, they'll have to. I think the two teams in the West that are kind of set, obviously the Canucks and the Jets, I think, made their moves, even though people say the Canucks could be looking to add. But that will be a fun Western Conference Finals if it comes to that. The matchup I meant to say was the Colorado against the Jets. Not the Stars.
Not the Stars. Okay.
Yeah, the Stars would play the Blues right now, I believe. Or
that's an easy.
The Kings, actually.
Oh, okay, not so easy.
No, because Vancouver will play the Blues. So if anything, the Kings is the one wildcard team on both conferences that I would say could surprise for real, like the Panthers did last year.
They shouldn't have traded for Dubois, but beyond that, I think that they have not an easy team to eliminate.
Yeah, and in the East, I mean, Tampa and Detroit are the two wildcard teams. I do not see either team making a run at all. Flyers are not. They're probably going to lose in the first round to the Canes. If that's the matchup that ends up being, the good news for the Panthers is we wouldn't have to face both the Hurricanes and the Rangers because they'll play each other. So we'll get the winner of that most likely if we get to the Eastern Conference Finals, which is going to be tough in itself. We would have to go through Toronto right now, and then basically the winner of the Bruins and whoever the other wildcard team is, which essentially I think the Panthers play the same two teams they played last year, maybe even all three, maybe in a different order, but they'll play all the same three teams as last year unless the Rangers can beat the Canes, which that's going to be tough. And I think in the East we can kind of see a repeat of last year or some similar matchups. And obviously in the West is where that's going to be really interesting to follow as well. But
and I think the Bruins are going to add one or two players. I think the Rangers will add a player. I think the Panthers will add a top 9 forward. I think the Leafs are going to add a couple guys, one to the blue line, maybe a forward, but definitely prioritize the blue line. Maybe a couple guys back there. So there'll be some tweaks. Carolina's probably going to try to get a goalie. I know there's rumors about them trying to move D'Angelo, which you could probably get him some back. I think in our case, we just have the cap space, so that's the good news for us. And we could try to figure out if there's enough of a package we can put together between a pick, a prospect, and maybe a player to try to get. Tarasenko would be the high end for the Panthers to try to add, because if you add Tarasenko, all of a sudden your top two lines are pretty scary, and our third line gets really stronger. If Tarasenko is not an option, I think other guys to look at. Tolvanen is a guy that I've always liked, and I've mentioned him to you, and it's a pending UFA. I don't know that the Kraken would let him go for cheap, but Tarasenko wouldn't be that cheap either. So Is that a guy that they could add? I think that guy could fit because he can block shots, he can score, he's young, has upside. You could even extend him probably and try to replace some of the forwards if you feel like you're going to lose Reinhardt or Verhage to add depth. But yeah, I think those are the kinds of guys that I guess you would think about adding. Even Eberle from Kraken 2 would be a guy that could come in and give us top 6 minutes. So, yeah, I think, we'll see who makes the move and where we are after the deadline. But the matchups are going to be tough for the most part, except maybe with the 8 seeds. I don't think the 8 seeds will be necessarily very strong. And then I'll just say people keep waiting for the Devils to make a run. And I know that they have not been healthy, so I'll give them that for sure. But I just keep seeing them fall. They'll get a game or two and then like get destroyed by some team. And when the Panthers have played them, I just don't see it. I see a lot of skill, but I see so many turnovers at the blue line, so many bad decisions. I think Luke Hughes is a turnstile. Like, he's incredibly talented, but dude, he turns it over so much. I think he's a minus player for the year.
Yeah, a lot of those flashy defensemen or those speedy defensemen are. It's just funny how we look at defensemen from an offensive point of view instead of just valuing what's really important. Sure, you need 1 or 2 defensemen that can pinch in here and there. Every team needs it, but if we look at the Panthers because we're Panther fans, but like the Panthers this year have not had a ton of scoring from the blue line, so you don't necessarily need it. It depends on your style of game. I think you need to balance both sides, and when you have these flashy guys that are kind of liability on defense, that kind of puts you in a tough spot. So yeah, we'll see.
But here's the context, right? Luke Hughes, I just looked it up, has 27 points or whatever in 50-some games. He's minus 14 for the season. Forsling has the same amount of points. He leads the league at plus 39. I know Forsling is obviously older, but Forsling was not a top pick. I mean, what was Luke Hughes? If I'm not mistaken, he was the high pick. He was look it up right now. He was a 4th overall pick, right?
Yeah.
So to me, again, that's like Forsling is a guy that diehard hockey fans know, and a lot of analysts know because of his underlying numbers are probably like off the charts, but he's not a household name. He's not a name that gets thrown around. He's a pending UFA, You don't know if Cito can afford him. I mean, we'll see, but nobody is talking about that guy. If I were a GM and I want to go after a pending guy who's still not signed, that's one of the guys I want. Because Forsling will give you key goals. He can give you really good skating. He'll give you some offense. He can jump in. But he can really defend. He's smart. He's hard to beat. He's great in the playoffs. The last 2 playoffs has been one of our best top 2 players in the last 2 playoffs runs. Like, that is a guy that you really value and should value. Luke Hughes could be score 100 points, win the Norris, whatever, because they gave it to the defenseman with the most points, not the best defenseman always. But that's to your point. Like, that's the whole thing, right? Like, it's great to have a guy that can score. I mean, look at Victor Hedman. He can score, but he's a pretty good defender, and that's why those cup runs. Makar has become a good defender, and not as easy to beat. So that's the whole point, right? Like, who are you going after? Who are you going after, and why? Is it just the name? Like Vetrano. Vetrano is a goal scorer. We had him with the Panthers. We saw that he used to get scratched. We had a very deep team, and he hadn't broken out yet. But he can definitely give you 20 to 25 goals. This year's like on pace to over 30. He doesn't get a lot of assists. He's not going to be the best guy defensively, right? So if you just want a pure shooter, somebody who can put on the power play and give you some goals because you just don't have that, then I think you go after a guy like him. But if you want a guy that you can trust in defense, who's going to give you some playmaking, like, he's not going to be the guy. And he's just a name and a guy who has a lot of goals, right? Like, so is he more valuable than Henrique? Probably not, right? Because it's more of a playoff fit and balance. And, so anyway, that to me, that's the difference between like the smart GMs and the ones that go after certain names.
Yeah. And we'll keep our eyes out to see what's going on out there. For any of you guys that are on Twitter or X, if I highly suggest you follow if you don't already. People like Frank Sarabelli. David Pagnotta, I think it's another one. Pagnotta, hope I said his name right.
Pagnotta.
Yeah, obviously Elliot Friedman, like Chris Johnston. They cover the Leafs, but they're also very, very plugged in. They have a lot of sources, and I think Elliot Friedman is probably one of the most accurate ones. So
yeah, Pierre LeBrun too.
Pierre LeBrun as well.
Kevin Weeks. If you just want to have the full picture, because it depends on the guy. It depends on who has the contact. Kevin Weeks is a clown. I mean, he's funny, whatever. But
I like him. But he'll announce some stuff that's just wild. Like, first of all, it's just his forehead.
Oh, but that's his shtick. That's his shtick.
And then he'll be like, "Look out for the Devils. They might get a goalie."
I know. But he does break things out once in a while. But Pierre LeBrun, Elliot Friedman, Saravalli, those are the guys that tend, and Johnston, those guys tend to break the news for the most part, at least for some of the main trades and stuff. And definitely worth a follow this time of the year. You can always unfollow after the deadline and wait till the off season. But in terms of the getting the alerts, but that's what I do the last week. I just turn on all the notifications and try to keep an eye out. So we'll probably make a few reaction videos for some of the big trades that happen.
Yeah, we'll do that. Some I shouldn't say funny breaking news, but you saw that player from Arizona that was like doing cocaine on a Instagram video.
Wait, what?
Adam,
no way.
What's his name? Adam Rudicka.
Adam Rudicka?
Yeah.
Isn't he a good player? Like a decent player?
So they he put out I think it was a live. I'm not sure. I just reading it right now on Twitter. But basically he was on camera doing what seemed to be cocaine or like smoking something. He had like something in his mouth. And he's been put on.
Yeah, he's a death player, but he's 24.
He's been put on waivers for the contract termination.
Some guys, man, just ruin their careers.
Yeah, Adam Rudicka placed on unconditional waivers. That's by Chris Johnston by the Coyotes. Contract terminated. I saw that video real quick, but
that's sad though. I mean, that guy.
Yeah, you don't know. You never know. So I don't want.
There's some guys in the league that struggle with alcohol and stuff. I mean, that's why you see guys going into the players. The players thing. So, play assistant program. Anyway, it's sad, but it's like, definitely a dumb move. But yeah, I guess not as big of a player for them.
Yeah,
and they're on a huge losing streak. I think they're also going to sell a little bit, but anyway, yeah, I'll keep an eye out, man. If there are any news or any big trades, I'll try to do a reaction video and share thoughts. And then if we get to do some videos together the next couple of weeks, especially like gearing up for the deadline, because I think a lot of the trades are going to happen in the last 3 days. People are going to get antsy, and by then some teams will have decided whether they're sellers. So we'll probably see some stuff.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks out, so I think next week you'll start to see some pieces move. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are just waiting. Like you said earlier, waiting till the end.
There's a lot of UFS. Cito, like, be patient because the market's gonna get flooded those last 2 to 3 days with a lot of teams wanting to sell all of a sudden, and not as many buyers because of the cap still not having gone up. So there's only going to be a few people buying, but my dog decided to bark now. There are a few people buying, but if you wait, you're still going to get a quality player. We just need a middle six forward. There are a few guys like that out there that won't cost a ton. It might even be a mid-round pick if you just wait, because some teams are not going to want to keep guys that they know they're not bringing back and they want to get something for them. I don't think we need to go after Tarasenko. I mean, if that happens, great, but there are a lot of guys that'll be happy. I mean, anybody who can play better than Cousins on offense, and I guess at this point, even defense, is not being great on defense. And that's a lot of guys in the league. So yeah, don't get desperate unless you get a call with a good deal.
Yeah, for sure. We'll keep an eye out on all of that. And we'll probably catch you guys next week unless something major happens during the week. If you like what you heard so far, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, help us out in the algorithm so we can get some views and grow the channel.
Yeah, and share the predictions, man. Share some predictions.
Give us some predictions. Yeah. What trades you guys think will happen, and also like playoff matchups and what you think it's gonna come, from those matchups. Who's gonna step up? And I think it's not gonna be as obvious as we always make it seem. NHL playoffs are so unpredictable. So So yeah, guys, thank you for watching. We'll catch you all next week. Peace.